Hi, welcome to the Action Outreach in Our Community podcast. I'm Dr. Jamila Clayton, and we're here to empower, educate, and engage with our community. At AOC, we believe education is the key to solving critical issues and creating a brighter future. Our mission is to raise community awareness through education, collaboration with organizations to drive social change. That's our core message. And today we're diving into a critical topic called MIST, and it's concerning missed and exploited children. And we're so glad that you all have joined us. And I wanted to set the stage and say, why does the issue of missing and exploited children matter? And here's why. Recently, the Houston Police Department has been searching for two teens, Skylar Baker, who's 14, and Sabrina Cordio, who's 15, who were last seen in Southwest Houston on February 26, 2025. They were last spotted on Grapevine Street near South Post Oak Road and Fakua Street. As of today, they have not been found. In Texas alone, there were 35,181 reports of missing children in 2023. A majority of these cases were runaways, accounting for 80 to 85% of the reports. Family abductions made up 10 to 15%, while stranger abductions were less than 1%. These statistics emphasize the need for heightened community awareness and proactive efforts to ensure the safety of children. Texas issued 13 Amber Alerts in the first 2 months of 2024, leading the nation in such alerts. Most of these cases involve family abductions or runaways, with only a small percentage being stranger abductions. So, to explore this issue further, we have expert guests with us today who will provide insights and recommendations on how we can all play a role in addressing this serious concern. So, our guests are from Houston Crime Stoppers. We have Sydney and Joshua, and would you guys please introduce yourselves and tell us what you do?
Of course. First and foremost, thank you for having us.
Yes,
My
yes.
name's Sydney Zeiker, and I am the Senior Director of Programs and Special Projects at Crime Stoppers of Houston, which is a very long title to say that I oversee all of our programming of any kind, which is outreach and education, it's victim services, it's our podcast. We have a podcast as
That's
well,
awesome.
our research center, our school program, and everything in between. And Joshua, for many, many moons, has been my right and left hand a lot of the time. So I'm
That's
really glad to
awesome.
be here with Joshua.
Yeah. Joshua Webb, I get to manage our Safe Community Institute at Crime Stoppers of Houston. So a little bit about our programming, as Sydney was talking about, when it comes to our crime prevention, it's split between two different institutes, our Safe School Institute and our Safe Community Institute. And I get to work with the safe community side. So that's mainly community outreach, parent education. We just did a parent meeting last night at Humble ISD, right? So making
Okay.
sure that we're actually out in the community. And our mission really aligns a lot with y'all's, right? Engagement, empowerment, and education, making sure people are aware of the issues that are really rampant here in our city, whether it is trafficking, missing, exploited children, you name it, right? The city of Houston has it. So how can we make sure that people are educated and aware so that we can keep each other safe?
Yes, well, thank y'all so much for being here today. I'm excited to dive into the
Yeah.
conversation. We have just a few questions, so we'll just go ahead and get started. So, human trafficking is often misunderstood. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about trafficking that the public should be aware of?
This
I
is no, you go.
Okay, sure. I listening to you read those stats off, right? I think one of the main misconceptions is that people that are victims of trafficking are taken or abducted by some random stranger. When really what we see is that it is somebody close to that person that is manipulating, exploiting, deceiving, taking
Yeah.
advantage of them. So whether it is a family member, somebody who is kind of generating a fake romantic relationship in order to build that trust, it is oftentimes people that are closest to that victim that are getting them into this trafficking experience.
And I think that Hollywood hasn't done us any favors.
Mhm.
All the trafficking movies that are produced on a large scale and have big budgets kind of show this, as we call it, a white man in a van, a snatching type
Mm-hmm.
depiction of what trafficking is. And so because those movies are seen by so many people, that's the idea of trafficking that we have, that someone in a white van's pulling up, snatching a kid off the street, and then trafficking them. And we're not here to say that that never happens, but that makes up less than 2% of any sort of trafficking that we see.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, as
Mhm.
Joshua said, we see a lot more what we call familial trafficking, which is someone in an individual's family really initiating the trafficking or being very aware that the trafficking is occurring and not intervening. We see a lot of trafficking happen from specifically boyfriends, which is a hard thing because there's a lot of vulnerability in a relationship and there's a
Mhm.
lot of trust, and that gets exploited.
Right.
Another big myth that I see is that trafficking only happens to girls, to
Mm.
females, and that's really not the case. We've seen quite an increase lately of male victims, and a lot of the time what happens with male victims, we've seen a lot of teenage and college-age boys being exploited
Wow.
recently. And really oftentimes what happens there is that they are exploited through pictures or videos that they've created and sent, and then that's used as blackmail, and it kind of escalates from there to trafficking. And there's a lot of stigmas around male victims, um, regardless of the gender of a victim. Victims don't typically identify themselves as human trafficking victims. That word human trafficking is an
Mhm.
advocate's word, it's not a victim's word.
Right.
They might not identify that they are being what we're saying as trafficking.
Mhm.
And especially when it comes to males, there's a stigma and kind of the cultural pressures of, you know, you're not a victim. You're a man. You should be able
Right.
to man up and take care of yourself.
Mhm.
Whereas with women, we tend to be, more willing to extend a helping hand, and we can envision that a woman is a victim, is vulnerable. It's harder to see for men.
And
Wow.
I think one more is that it's easy to spot trafficking. I think of stories all the time where there are students who are actively attending school in class, and when they're out of school, they're being trafficked, right? And so,
Wow.
again, if we can educate and empower the general community, parents, educators on the signs to look for, right? Whether it is a student with a lot of tardies or a lot of expensive gifts or gift cards or new shoes or things that should set off these alarm bells so that we can do a better job of recognizing it and intervening early enough to support whoever's going through
Mhm.
that.
Well, thank y'all for that because I wasn't aware of a lot of those things either. And it seems like they're always saying, like, oh, look out for the white van, don't park next to a white
Right.
van, and different things like that. But I was really shocked to hear that it's more family
Yeah, and we see a
occurrences.
lot of misconceptions kind of circle through social media.
Mm.
Things like, "Oh, if there's a ribbon tied
Right.
on your
Hmm.
door, then, someone's trying to traffic you." And again, we're not saying that that's never ever the case, but it's just statistically far less likely than some
Mm.
of the ways that Joshua and I have talked about so far.
Right. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you guys for that. How does Crime Stoppers of Houston work with the law enforcement and the community to combat human trafficking or missing children?
Yeah, so Crime Stoppers of Houston, our mission is to solve and prevent serious crime in partnership with citizens, media, and the criminal justice system. We are celebrating 45 years of service in the city of Houston this year. And the way that our organization was established was through our tip line, which is our anonymous
Mhm.
reporting system. So for 45 years, we have had the ability for any citizen, regardless of immigration status, gender, age, anything, to call into our tip line and provide information completely anonymous. We don't even have caller ID, so we can't even trace back who called. We
Okay.
don't ask for any identifying information, but people can call and provide information that could lead to suspect identification or arrest. And that includes a crime like trafficking. We pay up to $5,000 on um, nearly any felony level crime. So that's kind of how that mechanism started. In 1997, we brought our community based tip line to schools. So we started talking to students, empowering students to speak up. And that program has grown exponentially, really, since 1997. And we also, in addition to all the things that we pay cash rewards for in the community space, we'll also pay a campus based tipster. Again, we don't know if they're a student, a teacher, we don't
Mhm.
know, but a campus based tipster for information that gets a fellow student the help that they need.
That's
So
great.
could be,
Mhm.
there's a student harming themselves, or they suspect that one of their fellow students is being trafficked, even if there's
Mhm.
no crime there that someone's charged with. If our rewards committee deems that that individual the tipster, what we call it, helped in that situation, they'll advocate for a tip there. So that's kind of our law enforcement side. Our tip line is staffed by law enforcement. But then on the prevention side of things, we work with law enforcement to make sure that our messaging is sound, that we are actually articulating what they're seeing in real life cases. And then we have so many partnerships with HPD, with the sheriff's office, with all the different constable precincts to get that awareness information out.
Amazing.
So often we're asked by one of those individuals to come and attend a community event that they're talking about, or that they're hosting rather, and we'll provide the education information there. And then if we get a call to our tip line about a suspected human trafficking case, that information gets dispatched to the corresponding law enforcement agency who's working that case. So it's kind of all full circle there.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And I think I
Love
really
that.
want to reemphasize the fact that it is completely anonymous, right? I think there's a lot of misconceptions or misunderstandings about how Crime Stoppers work. I think for me, it's the difference between anonymity and confidentiality for me is important. I think we don't even collect any kind name, phone number, email address, IP address. We don't even collect that kind of information. And if a tipster accidentally says that as they are giving us their tip, that is removed from the tip before it gets passed on to the agency that's going to follow up on it. So we not only do we not want that, we legally can't collect any kind of identifying information by
Legally,
law.
yes,
by law.
we are protected by
okay.
law. So we
Okay.
cannot collect any of that information by Texas state law.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was great. I love that.
Mhm.
Y'all do that and for 45 years.
Yeah.
For 45 years.
Yeah.
No.
It's
been
amazing.
a long time.
It is. And again, the potential for the cash reward. And I think that's also
Mhm.
important for people. Don't have to give your name and you might get paid, right? And you
Right.
get to keep your community safe. So,
Exactly.
But-
I love that.
Roughly half of our tipsters never collect their money.
Mhm.
So I always think that that's interesting, that
Yeah.
a good portion of our tipsters are really just trying to
Trying to
do a
help.
good deed.
mhm.
That's great. Well, thank you. Let's see. So this is kind of about like online solicitation and internet safety. With the rise of social media and online platforms, how has online solicitation evolved, and what are the biggest threats today?
I think it's just increased access. Statistics, 95% of kids have not only a cell phone, but a smartphone, right? A device that connects directly to the internet. We know that most kids have at least one social media profile, whether that's Instagram, TikTok, Discord, Twitch, right? So not only are there more victims, right? But it's easier for these perpetrators to access their victims, right? It is easy to create a fake profile, pretend to be around their age, have similar interests, create some sort of romantic relationship or whatever it is, and take advantage of that, right? So I think it's the increased access that's one of the main
That's
things that
great.
we've see kind of contribute to the rise of it.
Absolutely. And, roughly 87% of our human trafficking, juvenile trafficking related cases have an online messaging component with it. So many of our teens have moved away from texting, and instead they message on a social
Yeah.
media platform, or even something like WhatsApp
Mhm.
or whatever. And some of our social media platforms, Instagram, Snapchat, have this quote unquote disappearing content element, which kind of makes
so
them feel
hard.
like they can test the waters with conversations that they might not in a text message that they think their parents are going to read.
Right.
And predators know that. Predators
Mhm.
know that they can kind of wear down or push young people into conversations that are more adult type conversations. And this is all part of the trafficking grooming process. One perpetrator, one predator will have many victims that they're kind of grooming at one time. The access that Joshua was talking about that social media has provided just allows one perpetrator to have, a dozen plus
Mm-mm.
kids that they're grooming at one time, and they could be pretending to be 12 different people in 12 different conversations. And
Ugh, that's
we
so
haven't even
scary.
scratched the surface of how AI has
I know.
Mhm.
made this even
Mhm.
more dangerous
Mhm.
for our families and our
Mhm.
kids.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. Well, this is kind of offline. Like, what are some
Yeah.
like ways for parents to kind of help monitor that, or kind of, is it just education?
And I think it's taking ownership, right? I think one of the main pushbacks that I hear is I want my kid to have their freedom, right? I don't want to infringe on that. That's their privacy, that is your child, that is your device, right? So if anything goes wrong, ultimately it's the parent's responsibility. So with that, taking the steps to protect the kid as best we can, right? Going through their phone, let them know that you're going to go through your phone or
Right.
not, right? Whatever rules we establish for our household, but parents have to take it seriously. I think there's always the, oh, it would never be my kid.
We call it not my kid syndrome.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So parents
Um,
taking ownership and doing what they need to do to keep their kids safe.
yeah. And I think, there's no 100% safe formula that I can
Mm.
give parents. And people have wanted that for as long as I've been at Crime Stoppers. They've asked for that. What age should I get my kids a phone? And what can I do to ensure that they will never interface with a predator? And my answer for them is that it is not if they will, it's when they will
Mhm.
interface with a predator. And
Mm.
it's teaching them to spot the signs
Okay.
and have conversations with them about safety, trafficking, but relational safety and who is a trusted adult and how should adults correspond with you in the real world and why are you following the people that you're following on social media? What's attractive to them? Have these open and honest ongoing dialogues so that you're encouraging them that if and when they make a mistake online, if and when they engage in a conversation with a complete stranger that they met, and they get that weird gut check that something might be wrong, that they know that they can come and talk to you
Okay.
as a parent without you
Mhm.
completely freaking out and taking their device from them
Mhm.
and shutting them down, because
Right.
that's honestly the worst thing we can do in a situation where your child might be groomed is just completely isolating them. Our children don't live in isolation, and even if they specifically don't have a cell phone. If you're saying a cell phone is not for me, not for my kid, well, their friends have a cell phone.
Right.
And when they go to
Mhm.
school, they have access to the internet there.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
And even if they don't have a cell phone, they might have a
a
Switch or a
tablet, yeah.
tablet or some sort of
Right.
gaming
It's
device,
just
right?
so many
It's
things.
not just cell phones anymore.
Yeah.
But I do want to provide, can you talk about things like Bark?
For sure, yeah.
Awesome.
So
That is a solution.
yeah,
Okay.
Bark is it. They're a wonderful organization, and they do a lot of different things, right? They are number one a monitoring service for parents, and some entire school districts use Bark.
Mhm.
And Bark goes through text messages, social media comments, emails, really anything that gets sent from a user's device, and it will scan it for mentions of self harm, for violence, for sexual content, for drugs, and will
Wow.
give the parent or whatever whomever administrator of that account. They'll say, "Hey, we saw this. Now is your opportunity to follow up," right? So they'll provide that monitoring service. But Bark also does a lot of really important research on how kids are using the internet,
Hmm.
right? Whether it is the slang terms that they're using that might
Mhm.
refer to something sexual or drug related,
Right.
as well as the emojis, right? Because some
Mhm.
emojis, a lot of emojis have kind of secondary meanings that again might be
Right.
sexual in nature, drug related, whatever it
Mhm.
is, right? So again, it's providing that education and that awareness that Bark does, but then also that monitoring tool that empowers parents to intervene when they need to.
Yep. Oh, that's great. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Great information. I'm glad we're talking to y'all today. Can you guys share some real life cases or stories that highlight the dangers of online solicitation and the importance of awareness?
Sure. So we have a case that we've helped with and have been exposed to where a young preteen, early teen age girl was messaging with someone that she thought was of similar age
Oh
online.
my
And this
goodness.
is a very
Mm.
common
Mhm.
type experience. So she's messaging with this person, and in our presentations, we actually show screenshots of these messages that are going back and forth.
Mhm.
And the conversation over time moves from a really general conversation about interest and just everyday type stuff
Mhm.
to asking more questions, or the perpetrators asking more personal questions. And then eventually it arrives at a point where they're asking this young girl to send pictures of herself, first in a bikini, and she's not comfortable with that, and then moves on to fully nude pictures. And
Mhm.
when the girl says, I can't, I'm not allowed, I would get in trouble, well, that perpetrator uses information that they'd learned
Oh.
previously. So they
Mhm.
previously learned that that individual, that girl, had a younger sibling and said, well, if you don't send me pictures of yourself, I'm going to come after your little sibling. Send me pictures of her instead. It's you or her, basically.
Oh my
And that's a
gosh.
tactic, and that pulls at those heartstrings because she, as an older sibling, is
Protective.
protective,
Yeah.
so protective of her young sibling. And
Yeah.
luckily, law enforcement could intervene in this case, but there are many cases where that's not the
Mhm.
situation. And then what happens there is that perpetrator now has those nude images of that child, uses them as blackmail, uses them to say, well, now I have this. And if you don't come meet me in person, I'm going to release this to everyone you know. I'm going to send this to your parents. I'm going to
No. Mm.
this,
Yeah.
that, whatever.
Yeah. And I think of one of our podcast guests, the Woods family.
Oh,
Their son James.
James.
Sydney has mentioned sextortion a little bit. James was maybe 16, 17 years old, got some messages from somebody on Instagram, somebody pretending to be a girl around his age. And they encouraged James to send some intimate images. The thing was that the young lady had sent the images first, right? So as a way
Oh
of
my
kind of
gosh.
getting James to let his guard down, well, she did it. I might as well do it too. But it was a
Right.
fake profile,
Oh no.
and it led to the sextortion that Sydney's kind of been mentioning.
James ended up taking his life,
Yeah.
dying by suicide. So this is really affecting our kids in so many different ways. They feel helpless and hopeless and embarrassed and ashamed for things that really they were coerced to do.
Yeah.
And that's why I say, it's important for parents to have these conversations and to say, we're here to help. And that family did
Hmm.
very much so. They're excellent, and they are huge advocates in the country. They talk about that story frequently. But, I kind of mentioned AI earlier, but the introduction of AI and the ability to create false nude images helps in situations like this. Who knows if that picture that lady sent was a real picture or not?
Exactly.
Certainly wasn't her,
Right.
Yeah.
right? And now we have the ability to completely create these false images from nothing
From fully
on the
clothed
internet.
regular images.
Mhm.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. I wanted to say it, but I forgot. Helping kids identify other trusted adults.
Yeah.
Most kids that are being blackmailed, harassed, sextorted, whatever, are not going to tell anybody because of the fear, because of the embarrassment. My parents told me not to talk to strangers. My parents told me not to send pictures of my body. I did it anyway. And now the worst is happening. I'm scared that I'm getting my phone taken away. They're going to be mad at me.
Mhm.
And so helping a kid, if they're not ready to come to their parents yet,
Mhm.
who else can they go to? I have an older sister. I would go to my big sister with anything before I went to my parents about it,
Right.
right?
Right.
So if it's a sister, sibling, cousin, uncle, trusted adults, though, I think is key. What adults do we know are safe and are there to genuinely support the kid through whatever they're going through?
Yeah, it's a great idea. Oh man, that stuff. I'm emotional.
I know we should have put a disclaimer first.
I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's good information. We need the awareness so that way we could
Yeah.
just be honest with our kids, our youth.
Yeah.
So thank y'all for that. So the last few questions are going to be more about crime prevention and community action.
Mhm.
How can the community, whether individuals, schools, or businesses, get involved in Crime Stoppers initiatives and prevent trafficking and exploitation of children?
So Crime Stoppers, we offer a lot of different programming that's completely open and free to the public. So first of
Mhm.
all, if we're hosting an event, and you can find all of our events on our social media or on our website, which is
Okay.
crime-stoppers.org, attend, come, learn, because knowledge is power. And so when you learn about the signs and symptoms of trafficking, of even unhealthy relationships,
Mhm.
which often is a precursor to trafficking, you can then share that information with your network. We're so much more powerful when we are all talking about it than when we're just Crime Stoppers on an island talking about it. That invite us to speak if you have a group of
Yeah.
parents, if you have a group of students, if you have a group of grandparents. We've done that multiple times,
Mhm.
talked to groups of grandparents. Um, and then also, I think that it's really important for our corporate partners to get involved. We've done a good job of identifying that hospital workers really need to be trained and educated on
Yeah.
human trafficking. Same with airport workers. If you listen
Mhm.
in the airport, there's a lot of messaging about trafficking now, and a lot of trafficking has been intercepted even at our local airports because
Okay.
there's been training there. But we need to expand that. More medical workers, people at HEB
Right. Yeah.
need to know.
Mhm.
People at Macy's, we just had a podcast guest just this week. Her episode aired on Wednesday, and she recounted a story where she was trafficked as a child, and her perpetrator took her to a Macy's and was buying lingerie for someone that was her size. She was 10.
Oh my God.
And that Macy's worker just had no idea. Had that worker been trained and able to identify that as a red flag, someone could have intervened and helped her at that age, and they didn't. So it's talking, it's educating, but it's also scraping away at those misconceptions and saying, actually, that's not really how it works. This is how it works.
Mhm.
If they're looking to support Crime Stoppers as a volunteer, one of our more popular volunteer activities is assembling child identification kits. So they are really a singular tool that if a child goes missing, whether they are abducted, whether they walk off, run off themselves, that has all the information that law enforcement needs to start their investigation. Because we were talking a little bit earlier, in that moment, parents are panicking, they're afraid, they're in shock, they're experiencing trauma, and they are trying to handle themselves as well as address this situation. So anything that we can do to make that process as easy as possible, including those child ID kits, right? There's a place to put a picture of the child. There's an ink strip to put their fingerprints in there, as well as just height, weight, other identifying
social media
information. Their social media
platforms.
platforms. Again, just to give law enforcement as much information as possible, as quickly as possible, so that we can start that investigation and find that missing child.
And
That's good.
those child ID kits we had them for many years, but we redesigned them alongside one of our local trafficking survivors, Dr. Nisi Hamilton, who helped us identify what else do we need to know to help identify if this is a trafficking victim. And she created a tip card of things for parents to look out for based on real life experience.
Mhm.
So I think that's important. We've got to empower our survivors and
Yeah.
overcomers who want to give back
Mhm.
to provide input that's accurate to the community.
Yeah.
Great.
One more thing I'll add. On an individual level, right? We talked about corporate and group.
Yeah.
I think on an individual level, Dr. Hamilton, we had an event with her and another human trafficking survivor, Kathy Gibbons. Yeah.
Mhm.
And one thing that Dr. Hamilton said is there are ways that we can challenge the ideas that kind of normalize trafficking and other forms of exploitation, right? I think of how common it is for, I think, young boys especially to like want to be a pimp, for example, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
in the music, whatever it is, right? And trying to communicate really the reality of that,
Right.
the normalization of sexting and just
I
the
know.
increase in sexual activity in younger and younger ages, right? I think as individuals, being able to spot that and challenge that whenever we can.
That's great. Well, thank you guys so much. And the next question, for anyone who wants to take action, what's the best way to support Crime Stoppers of Houston's mission and program?
Go to our website at crime-stoppers.org. If
Okay.
you want to support us financially, you can do it there. If you want to
Great.
support us through volunteer work, like what Joshua was talking about, there's a form for you there.
Great.
If you want to support us by inviting us to speak to your group or organization, there's a request form there. I think that's how we got connected with you guys.
Yes.
So we are here to fully serve the community, and everything we do is free. So nothing would make us happier than for someone to reach out and say, hey, I heard about you guys on this podcast, and I'd like to get involved.
That's great.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you guys want to add? Anything else that?
In addition to all those things on our website, we have a newly revamped resource center. So
Okay.
even if you aren't able to schedule a presentation for a group that you're a part of, if you just want some more information, we have tip sheets and one pagers and YouTube videos
Mhm.
on not
Good.
just human trafficking, on social media, on mental health, on fentanyl awareness, on vape, 20
Wow.
plus, 40 plus different
Oh,
topics that
wow,
we talk
okay.
about as an organization. And so that all on our website as well, crime-stoppers.org.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Awesome.
having us.
Thank you too.
Yes, happy
And
to be here.
we look forward to airing this and getting this podcast episode out to as many people as possible and working with you guys in the future again as well.
Absolutely.
We can't wait. We're glad to be partners.
Thank you.
Thank you.